In this second video of my 3D printed series, I'm going to build and do my first part review of the Gear Guts Pharoh Necron Miniatures, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right on to 3D printing part 2, and this one and the next one is going to be all about the Gear Guts Pharoh miniatures. Now they do other ranges of 3D printed miniatures. There is like an orc equivalent, but of course what we really want to talk about, because I'm a Necron channel, is the Necron equivalents, the Pharohs. Now they sent me 2 sets of miniatures to try out. I had the Doomstalker equivalent, the Apocalypse Walker, and I had some Lich Guard with sword and boards, which are called Magi Pharoh Guards with Hex Phase, Capho Asses and Repulsor Shields. Yes, something like that anyway. Now I'm going to talk more about the aesthetics of these miniatures later in the video, or maybe even in the next part, depending how it goes. But first I want to get right out there and tell you that I don't really have much experience with 3D printed stuff. If you want to find out more about my experience, then of course go and watch the first part. So now you know that, let's have a quick review of these miniatures. Now the material itself, it was easy to clean, and it was quite a hard material, especially to what I'm used to the point that I had to actually cut some sections off rather than scrape them. I did find some more fragile sections broke, even with being very careful. It was a bit more brittle than maybe plastic would be, which I suppose is expected, but it was easy enough to just super glue the broken pieces back that did break off. Now to be fair and to be clear, it was only 2 pieces that broke. One of the little swords broke off of the hand on the Lich Guard, and on the Stalker, one of the little very thin sort of metal bars just detached from one side, and I just had to glue it on. So very minor things. Plus I didn't have to wash them because they've already been washed when they were sent out. So let's talk about the quality of the print, and I have no idea which printer is used to print these miniatures. I can only compare these miniatures with my good buddy Richard and his Mars Pro 2 2K HD printer. He's printed a few bits and pieces out for me, and I've seen some of his miniatures with it. If you haven't checked Richard's channel out, then you can do so in the description below. There's a link for you. Now I have to say that Richard's miniatures that come out of his 3D printer, compared to the Gear Guts one, the material does seem a bit different. Richard's detail is excellent, very good, as is the detail on the Gear Guts miniatures. However, Richard hasn't done what I would call extra fine detail, like really small detail, and the Gear Guts miniatures do have some really small details, and I have to say those extra small details aren't quite as crisp as I would have expected maybe in plastic, to the point that there's a pattern going down the side of the Hyperphase sword which just really isn't very crisp. And when I was building these, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to paint that? However, I'm going to review this a little bit more in the next video, because the next video is going to be about me painting these miniatures and then comparing them to the Games Workshop ones. Now I haven't looked at postage on the website, I'll be honest, but let's just look at the actual miniatures themselves. The Apocalypse Walker, the Doomstalker equivalent, is £30. Now the Games Workshop miniature is £26.50. There is also no base supplied with the Gear Guts miniature, so you have to get a base separate. I think I got a base off of eBay. I think it cost me about £3, so you have to bear that in mind as well. Now the Games Workshop one, of course, is plastic, and it is a push fit type miniature, single pose miniature, as is the Apocalypse Walker. Now the Apocalypse Walker does have a gearing system where you can actually rotate the top of the miniature on a little, well, almost like a screw. It was quite interesting. However, I totally missed that because of what I'm going to talk about in the next section. So let's carry on looking at the prices. Now the no, I'm not going to say that name again. The Lichguard equivalents were £22, and the Games Workshop kit is £30. Again, no bases supplied with the Gear Guts Miniatures, but the Games Workshop kit does have all of the options. You can make Lichguard with both weapon options, and you could make Praetorians with both weapon options. You get a lot of spares left over if you glue them together, and if you do what I've done with some of my miniatures, if you magnetise them, you can have all 4 options available to you. Now you can buy the bits separately for the Gear Guts equivalents, but of course it would push the price up. So good value for money at £22. However, you've got a lot of models there for the Games Workshop kit. So I don't know, I just get the feeling if you're looking to get cheap miniatures, then probably these aren't the way to go, because they're not actually really cheap. They do offer you something different from the Games Workshop miniatures. So if you're looking for an alternative style, then yes. And of course the other side of the coin is if you want these miniatures for your army but you don't want to support Games Workshop and give them your money, then this is certainly an alternative. Now these minis were easy to build, and the material just sticks together with super glue. As you can see from this build video, I also used some green stuff in certain areas, sticking the body to the legs, for example, where I just filled the hole with some green stuff before I used the super glue, just to really help with the bond. However, the Doomstalker equivalent had no instructions, and it did take a lot of my skills to work out how it went together. I did, however, miss the fact that it was able to pivot. Not a problem for me, because I just magnetised the top half to the bottom half, which is what I did with the Games Workshop miniatures anyway, mainly for storage. There are assembly instructions for some of the other models. So the Ghost Ark equivalent, for example, has an animated assembly instruction. There's not one for the Stalker yet, but I believe there is going to be one. Okay, so the aesthetics. Let's talk about the look of these miniatures, and as discussed in the first video, I'm not really sure how I feel about the whole IP thing. These minis are very similar to Games Workshop minis for sure, especially the Stalker. I don't want to get into the IP discussion here. That's for you to make your own mind up. The symbols are not Games Workshop symbols, and there are enough changes like 3 legs instead of 4 on the Stalker. All of the orbs are not round, they're more of a diamond shape. I'm sure there is enough change to avoid any IP issues, and of course the Lichguard equivalents are a lot different with their more Egyptian look. The whole range of minis do match with each other when looked at as a set, and if you had a whole army of them, I think they would look pretty cool. But as I always say, don't judge a mini until you've built and painted it, and that is what I'm going to do in the final part of this series. So stay tuned for my final review and comparison video of these minis versus the Games Workshop versions. And if you didn't see the first video, here it is for you, and here's one of my other videos which I think you will enjoy.